You're watching Single Process with Joe and Bob. We created this video series to help you navigate the difficult process of divorce, and we hope this helps you on your journey. Our segment today is kind of on just random questions you may have when you're starting out the divorce process. Just things we get asked by our friends.
Like every day now.
Yeah. As divorce is escalating amongst our age group, it is.
It really is, yes.
So
No, but you're right. But things like how much is it going to cost, and can I leave my home without giving up my legal rights to the marital home? I mean, these are kind of
Things like
important
that.
questions, right?
Yep. Just random questions.
All right. So luckily we have Jill Bicks with us. Jill Bicks is a former litigator who now focuses on family law, and she's become an outstanding collaborator. So what about, you want to start with like a retainer? I mean, last time I heard the term retainer, I was getting my kids' orthodontia work. So what's a retainer?
Oh, it's true, a retainer. What is it? So a retainer is basically an advance against legal fees.
Okay.
And different lawyers have different amounts that they ask for. There's no such thing as a standard retainer. And if it gets used up, you're going to have to pay more. And if there's anything left, you get it returned to you at the end of your case. And most lawyers, including me, want to get a sense of what the case is about and how difficult it's going to be and what the issues are. And the retainer will depend on what the client reports about that.
And who's on the other side? Yeah.
Okay, so
That's a big one.
Yeah.
That's a big one,
Huge.
Barb.
But let's talk about those legal fees, because here's the thing. I may be conciliatory and wanting to do this in an inexpensive way, and my spouse, soon to be ex, may hire a shark who's just going to chew up our, savings.
Oh, yeah.
How do you preclude that? Who pays for the legal fees?
Well, that is one of the biggest frustrations of people, because who budgets for legal fees in a divorce?
No.
You don't. And if you have no access to your family's money, if you're the spouse that doesn't have the accounts, it's very, very difficult. Typically, attorney's fees are paid out of the marital estate. But what if the estate doesn't have money?
Right.
People get loans from their parents, people take mortgages against their house and home equity lines. It can be a real
But
problem.
is there a limit to where you can say to your spouse, even if there are funds, let's say he's racked up $750,000, he's on the phone with his lawyer every day. Is there no limitation to which you don't have to bear that expense?
It's in Connecticut, and I can only speak to Connecticut. The court might take that into consideration at the end, or you might negotiate that he's responsible for his fees and you're responsible for yours. But that's just one negotiating point like all the other ones.
Wow.
Well, I've seen people abandon the process because they're just out of money. They just give up.
And stay married.
Stay married, or they take a bath on the settlement.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there's no end in sight. I mean, I think if you wanted to intimidate someone, you could just say, I'm willing to throw as much money as I need to at this.
When a client comes into my office, I say to them,
How much money do you have?
you can spend it all,
Yeah.
or you can be smart, and we can sit here and we can strategize how to work with your spouse to make sure that he doesn't give his lawyer the answer, I'd rather pay you than pay her. Because that's what people sometimes say.
Yes.
And that's pretty crazy.
That's pretty
Yeah.
crazy. So talking about abandonment, let's talk about the marital home. This is the question I get asked all the time. If I move out, am I giving up my rights to the home? What does that look
Yeah, but
like?
it's so awful. Like you're fighting all the time. Oh, yeah.
Living together
Yeah.
during that separation time is terrible.
And people say just take separate bedrooms, but that doesn't really work. You don't want anything to do with each other.
No, that's really painful, and particularly if there are kids.
Yeah.
So this is a really state-specific thing, so I want to be careful, because
Okay.
I'll talk about Connecticut. In Connecticut, there's no such thing as abandonment, so you don't have to worry about that.
Not just the kids, but the home, the asset.
The asset, you're never no, that is not abandoning the asset at all.
You're not
No.
giving up your percentage of the home.
And
or,
I'd be really
Definitely
surprised
not.
if any state considered you moving out, abandoning your kids, right? Jill?
Right.
Definitely not. And in Connecticut, there's a special statute that says if you've moved out of the house to reduce the tension, to benefit the kids, that's considered a really good thing. And
Really?
that's a positive step that you've taken.
What are the automatic orders? We bandied that term about, we sort of touched on it in one interview, but I didn't really understand this as I was going through the process.
Yeah, so this is a really state-specific thing as well. And in Connecticut, when someone files for divorce, something called orders go into play. And they're relating to the finances and your assets, and they're relating to your children. And the whole purpose is to maintain the status quo so that someone doesn't take the children and move to another state.
Okay.
Or take an asset like cash and buy a business and suddenly make it illiquid. You can't do any of those things without the other person's agreement. So it's meant to preserve the status quo and prevent cheating.
Okay.
Basically.
So what happens if someone does go and buy a new car during that time? What's your remedy?
Right.
So that's considered a violation of a court order.
Okay.
And subjects the person who does that to a finding of contempt. And it's a civil contempt, which means you can be fined, which means you can be thrown in jail if it's repeated. So there are pretty serious consequences.
Would they also possibly adjust the settlement to reflect whatever transgression that's happened, if
Yeah.
it's financial?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's happened to me. I mean, mounting debt that occurred during that time
Yeah.
became part of our settlement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Especially if the debt is not in what they call the ordinary course. So, you know, some people live that way. Some people live in a way that they're going into debt. And if you have two separate households all of a sudden, that's considered to be in the ordinary course. So you have to be careful, because if debt accumulates, you might be on the hook for it.
Yeah.
Even if it's, you know, the other person
Well,
accumulating.
that's what I found, that a judge said, if my spouse runs out of money for child support, it's on me. He doesn't just go to jail.
No.
I thought, I've watched a lot of television. I thought he would go to jail and be a deadbeat dad. No, it just falls now on me to pay that expense.
Well, and it falls on you to go after him. So there are court processes, but he's not going to get thrown in jail if he has an excuse, like he ran out of money, I have no money, I can't pay.
Well, one thing I have noticed, a lot of men use it, not men necessarily, people use this as a strategy.
Yeah.
They know that you have to go after them to get resolution.
Yeah.
So they'll drag their feet on things, they'll raise
Right.
flags, be difficult during the process, right?
Yeah. Which is why one of the most important things is to know the person you're dealing with. You know your spouse better than any lawyer. And so the challenge is to kind of work with your lawyer to make sure you're not going to drive that person to self-destructive kinds of behavior. Yeah.
How quickly can you expect to get divorced?
Ah.
Is this like what happened to that quickie run off to the Caribbean islands and get a quickie?
One of our attorneys was like, if you think it's X amount, it's 3 times that amount.
That's also such a hard question,
Yeah.
because it really depends on how complicated your assets are, how old your children are. You know, here's the big thing. I know this therapist that used to ask couples, like, if divorce is midnight, what time is it for you? And if one of the spouses is saying, well, it's 11:59, and the other one is saying, well, it's kind of like 4:15, that's going to take long.
Okay.
Because you're not in the same emotional place.
That's an interesting comment.
It really is
Yeah.
the emotion driving it. And if you have two people who are like, yeah, we're done, that can be quick.
Yeah.
So is there any advice you can give, having seen this all the time continually with
should
your
you
clients?
be rushing to the finish? Should you be trying to drive the
Yeah.
process, or should you just be taking your time and letting it happen?
That's such a good question, because I think that people who rush and whose objective is to be done at all costs really end up regretting later the settlement.
Yeah.
And so to deal with those feelings that you have, which are natural, you
Yes.
want to get out of pain. It's painful. It's expensive. Bring a mental health professional into your divorce, whether it's your own therapist, whether it's someone in the mix, like in a collaborative divorce,
Yeah.
which we can have, because those emotional feelings can lead you to a bad deal.
In my case, it did, and going back in post was way more expensive, way more time consuming, way more emotional. I was shocked. We had a finalized divorce and went back to renegotiate some things.
Yeah.
So you need to take your time. I think it's time well spent.
And why was that? Were there just issues that you hadn't really thought
because we were
through?
rushing
Just
to the
rushing
finish
to
line.
the finish line.
We were both just like eager to get it behind us and get the divorce on the books. You know?
Okay, I'm also going to touch on one other
Yeah.
mistake you and I bizarrely both made.
I don't make mistakes, but yes, what did you do?
Nesting. Can you explain what nesting is and why nobody should do it?
It's truly for the birds.
It's truly for the birds.
Nesting. Okay. So nesting is this concept in a parenting schedule where you keep the kids in one house and the parents move. So the kids are in the nest and the parents fly in and out.
So it
and
keeps
maybe
things stable for the children.
Oh,
and it's such a great
It sounds great.
thought.
It
It's
sounds
like,
great.
happy, we're gonna nest.
Yeah.
And you know, frankly, when you're divorced, you kind of want to be done with
Yeah.
the other person. You don't want to be sharing a home. So if your kids are really young, maybe for a short period of time, but you need to have that exit strategy for nesting. Don't let it go on forever.
Okay.
Have a process in place to change that schedule
Yeah.
and know in advance that this is a short-term solution.
Literally, I mean, you
I
can
agreed
write
to
in
it
your-
for 5 years. I lasted 3 months, and
Yeah.
renegotiating that exit.
I agreed
was
to
almost
3 months. It's
main-
been 5. Yeah. But to your
It's
point about
tough.
the exit strategy, also the kids, you're living in this constant state of flux. Like they want closure. They want to know
Where
where
they're
this is
gonna be.
headed. And I think all I've done is kind of kick the can down the road for them.
Yeah.
A lot of positives, but a lot of negatives. I just didn't really consider it.
Yeah. And you know, look, this is a tough thing. And if you consider divorce to be the way I consider it, which is just reshaping a family unit, when you have kids, your divorce doesn't mean the end of dealing with that ex.
Jill, thank you so much for being here with us. And for more advice on how to navigate your divorce successfully, please log on to singleprocess.me.